On today's show, I am joined once again by Glen Willis to talk about Dyson Daniels in two-part fashion. Part one is coming up right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1800. Yes, 1800 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday. And today's show is sponsored by the folks at Gametime. Download the Gametime app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out anywhere you might find your podcast. That includes Apple and Spotify and Overcast on the audio side. And you are also welcome to join us on YouTube, where you should be liking this video right now as you are watching it. Please subscribe on that platform and really across platforms. The best way to help the show is to subscribe on audio platform and video platform to maximize all of that. And yes, as I said before, episode 1800 coming to you right now. Obviously, a round number milestone. I will thank everybody for listening to the podcast for a long time. There were some sickos out there, and I mean that in the best possible way, who've been around since the very beginning of this podcast journey back in 2016. It has been a long time. I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you for being here. Even if you are a new listener, thank you for coming, and hopefully you will be sticking around for the long haul. For reference, also, the breakdown of the Hawks play-in loss to the Bulls back in April was episode 1697. So we are well over now 100 episodes in just this offseason. And obviously several more to come before camp arrives in about a week and a half. And the preseason opener will be coming in about 2.5 weeks at this point in time. But at any rate, the beat rolls on. We're very busy on the podcast. In recent days, I've had Glen Willis on the show a lot. He'll be coming up actually in a second. Also, I had a show on Tuesday with Anthony Irwin, who covers the Lakers, and we went in depth on a pretty intriguing subplot to this season, which is the Hawks tracking and monitoring the Lakers for draft pick purposes. That's a fun conversation. That's stuff that we're listening to at some point with myself and Anthony Irwin. And today's show is actually a two-parter with Glen Willis. So he's back on the show with us once again as part of our Player Capsule series. We talked for a long while over the weekend, just a few days ago now. I already shared the first part of this podcast on Monday when we discussed Larry Nance in standalone one podcast fashion. This time around, Glen is back to talk about Dyson Daniels in two-part fashion. There's obviously real intrigue with Dyson, this really intriguing piece who is talented, especially on defense, etc., coming over in the DeJounte Murray trade. And so what you're about to hear is part one of that discussion. Part two should be available in the same podcast feed right after this. So as soon as we're done listening to part one, stay tuned for part two. Check out the entire conversation in full. And one more time, please subscribe to the podcast. All right, with all that out of the way, on episode 1800, here we go with Glen Willis and part one. Okay, let us turn the page and talk about Dyson Daniels, who I know Hawks fans are more excited about than a lot of different players on this roster. It was funny as we're talking this weekend, I think it was this morning, maybe yesterday or this morning, a picture surfaced from Trae Young of Trae sitting between Dyson Daniels and Zachary Richeche. And I swear to you, Glenn, 8 people sent me that picture in like 5 minutes when it came out. Hawks fans are very excited about this. Part of that's Richeche too. Part of that's that Trae was with his teammates, all those things. But a lot of it is that people love Dyson. People are in on Dyson. Maybe that's because we've hyped him up a lot, and I think that's fair. I think I've been very positive about Dyson Daniels as a big piece of that transaction and what he can be. We'll dig it on him, but let's go back. Some of us might be repeating ourselves a little bit from previous episodes. That's okay. What do you think of Dyson Daniels, broadly speaking, and as part of that return for DeJounte? Because while the picks were, of course, a big part of it, I think it's being underplayed nationally how important Dyson was to the Hawks. I think the Hawks don't do the trade without Dyson Daniels. And I get why people are focused on the picks, but Dyson was a real piece in the Hawks' mind as far as why they did that transaction.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. People ask me, is he the best defender they've had, or the best point of attack defenders they've had since Thabo and Damari? Probably. I love Kent Bazemore, but
I think so for sure. By the way, I think it's if it's not him, it's going to be somebody like DeLon. I mean, who else is there? We've done this, I know, with Tyler, but I like Baze too. I don't think Baze was ever the defender that Dyson Daniels was last year. Personally,
yeah, and so Yeah, and that's the thing for me is like he's a legit, like when you watch him play, all the technique is there, the footwork is there. He knows how to use his hands, he knows how to use his length. He's early in rotation, he's on time when he's digging at the net. I mean, and he just never stops being disruptive, whether he's on the ball or off the ball. He's just like knows how to just create chaos. And that's just going to be a really new dynamic for this team. And so the whole kind of conversation is Dyson going to start out. Well, I don't know how you acquire this guy and don't start him. So I know I've said it here before, so I'll try not to do another 5 minutes on that. But for me, I mean, he's so good defensively. And then, on the other side, people are asking, like, what is he offensively? Like the shooting numbers, so someone just looks at the numbers, it's like, well, can he shoot? And for me, he's young. He's still growing as an offensive player. His defense is definitely way ahead of his offense right now. There's no question about that. But the ball, the ball handling's there as a cutter. He puts pressure on the rim. He's learning how, with his length and his size, to put pressure on the rim from the wing spot and kind of attack the rim when the lane's open. And so for me, it's about kind of getting him, acclimated to the kinds of opportunities that Trae is going to create for him. And I think a change this year for Hawks fans that the season's right around the corner now. It is almost all. It seems like if you think back, it's almost always been Trae feeding a center at the rim, right? And everything else is kind of built around that. I think this year you're going to see Jalen cutting, Dyson cutting, Ricochet cutting, right? Hunter even got into a little bit of cutting last year, in that sort of thing. And then the other aspect that changes with Dyson and the other changes on the roster is last year, the guys that are attacking the rim, or attacking via drives, we'll put it that way. Trae, under the rim guy, still super awesome at it, right? DeJounte, under the rim guy. Sadiq, an under the rim guy. Hunter, a lot of inconsistency in terms of how he presents at the rim when he's attacking as a cutter, what have you. Now you got Jason, you got Ricochet, you got Dyson. You have these guys who can actually put pressure on the rim from the 2, the 3, and the 4 spot, and that's going to be a very different dynamic. It means you don't have to generate shots at the rim solely through your centers. You can mix it up, right? And they actually have guys with length and guys that can get to the rim and play over the rim and put pressure there. And that's just having that on the wing is a completely different dynamic than, the last 3 or 4 years. It feels like 80 to 90% of that has always been going through the center.
Definitely, for sure. And I want to make sure we talk about the offense a lot because the defense is, of course, where he's built. And you said that perfectly. His defense is ahead of his offense as Glen's cat makes an appearance on the podcast.
My cat loves you. He doesn't have time. It's, yeah.
It is what it is. But just to say the bio, because I know there are probably some people, while I know we have some diehard listeners, that may not be super dialed into the NBA from the months of July through September. So Dyson Daniels, just for some bio here, this newly acquired guy, 8th pick in the draft a couple years ago. This is about to be year 3 for him. 21 years old. He'll be 22 in March, so most of 21 this season. Still very young. I made this point recently on a show, but he's younger than like 3 or 4 of the top 15 picks in the last year's draft. Like he's draft age right now, despite coming in and being a 2-year guy. So 6'7" listed, about 200 pounds or so, thin but really strong. Kind of a versatile guard, I would say, as the offensive side of the floor. Let's stick there first. We'll come back to the defense later. He was basically a pure wing as a rookie as far as his numbers and position stuff in New Orleans. They didn't really play him on the ball at all, which makes sense. He was 18, 19 years old on a pretty good team. Last year played some more point guard, and I'm using that in quotes. I looked this up in pretty crazy detail, actually, but I'll do the short version. He always was on the court with either Zion, Brandon Ingram, or both when he was the point guard, which means he wasn't really playing a ton of like traditional point guard. He wasn't running the offense. He was helping. He was initiating. He was having the ball in his hand some. But it's kind of like it might be in Atlanta where like there's this debate that we've been talking about for months, and we'll talk about it now, I guess, about what position he is and like a point guard minutes behind Trae. But he is someone who's going to have the ball in his hands some. I think he has that pedigree. He's got that skill level. We'll save the shooting. But aside from the three-point shooting, which is a different discussion that we're going to have, what do you like or not like about Dyson? Because I think he's it's almost been, for me, I know it's been what I've heard about him from fans or even nationally. It's like, okay, can he shoot or not? And that is definitely the number one question, and I won't push back on that. But he's more than just a guy to stand in the corner. Like, he's not Andre Robertson where he can't do anything else. He's a guard. Like, he has guard skills, And yes, the shooting is important, but I don't want to overlook the other stuff that he can do on offense. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You've heard me talk about FanDuel many times before, and FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Something a little bit different for you this time around. However, now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game with YouTube TV and the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. When you get there, by the way, FanDuel Sportsbook, you will know, is awesome and easy to use. They have all stuff you're looking for across the sports betting space, from over-unders to point spreads, money lines, player props, live betting, future bets, and much more. The app is safe, it's very secure, and they cover the entire range of sports as well. That includes the NBA, as you listen to this podcast, WNBA, NFL is in full swing now, college football, of course, MLB, golf, tennis, soccer, hockey, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so much more. And now is an awesome time to set up with the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook. And all you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to get started. One more time, just visit FanDuel.com and check out America's #1 sportsbook.
Yeah, and that's where I would encourage Hawks fans who kind of think back to the way the Hawks have played on offense for the last 3-4 years or whatever. It's Trae, spot-up shooters, and the big that's attacking the rim and middle pick and roll on the dive, right? And it seems like that's been. I think that's not how Quinn wants to play. I think Quinn wants to mix it up more, get more split cut action, more movement, more screens on the weak side. Just create pressure on the defense from the weak side, and that's where the bigger guys can do that. The shooting is kind of a swing skill, and I think people. I think I want to give credit. I think it was Sam Vecini who said New Orleans had one of the best shooting coaches in the league on their staff, and so and so that I think that means something as well. But he's young, right? And he was never featured in any way offensively. To your point around who he was playing with, and so for me, I know some people might. I don't know. I get a little feeling sometimes that people find this annoying when I take this approach, but to me, I don't want to limit him as a 21-year-old. I want to say, okay, for the first time, he's stepping into what I think will be full-on starter minutes, game in, game out, and he's never played with a guard like Trae. There's no doubt about that, right? CJ is a total pro, right? But CJ's not Trae, right? I'm as big a CJ McCollum fan as there is in the world, right? I love CJ, right? And so for me, I just don't want to put like limitations on him. I want to say to myself, let's see what he can do as a starter in a slightly scaled up role on offense, and see how he and Trae kind of mesh in that way. Can he get to 35% shooting this year? That would be a nice step for you this year, right? But for me, I think the head-to-head passes, and he's so good in transition as a passer, as a creator in transition. He knows how to use his feet to kind of create passing angles. And like I said, as a cutter, it's not like, oh, I got to cut, and it's a second late, like we've seen the Hawks wings, the last few years and things like that, where everything's just a tick off timing wise. He's not late. If the gap is there, if the crease is there, he's in it, and he's putting pressure into that crease. And so for me, it's just he has so much feel, right? Now, what can he do with the ball in his hands? That is truly a fair question to think about. Yeah. Can he run a high volume of pick and rolls, or second side pick and rolls? Can he run second side DHO and actually be someone that is super productive and have some efficiency doing that? Those are big TBDs for me. But playing off of Trae as a cutter, as a guy who can do those things, who can make connected passes, who can play on the catch, that stuff I don't worry about. It's when defenses, as they often have, force the ball out of Trae's hands to him. Now he's become organically the primary creator on the second side, or whatever you might be. That is the stuff that will really, I think, impact their offensive upside when Trae and Dyson are on the floor together. And I think if anyone says they know how it's going to go, I don't know how they know that. I'm taking a kind of wait and see mode, but because he's young, smart, a good processor, resourceful, has a reputation of working hard, I think it's going to go pretty well. But I think it will be stepping stones. It'll be kind of maturation and improvement across the season. I wouldn't expect that all to come together first week of the year.
I like the way you put that, in that we don't know, and It's 100% fair. The shooting again is the X factor, but even the shooting kind of plays into, if he gets guarded eventually, that will open up other things. Like it's not just can you make a three or not, it's can you command respect, like from defenses. And right now, and justifiably, guys are not going to guard him. Teams are going to leave him open from three, and they should. Objectively speaking, they shouldn't until he proves otherwise. But that's another. It's all part of the same package. It's never just shooting or non-shooting. But I mean, he had this tiny role in New Orleans last year. 12% usage in his first 2 years in New Orleans for a guard that's so small.
Yep.
And it made sense. They have a lot of guys that need the ball in their hands. He wasn't like an established piece, but that's worth noting. He did actually improve a lot inside the arc last year. By the numbers, by the eye test that I've seen, he shot 50% on floater range shots last year and looks like he has good touch in that range to me. I like that as a weapon for him, as a guy who's 6'7" and is athletic. He shot 55% on twos last year. That's a good number for a guard in particular. He's like average-ish at the rim, but that's totally fine for a guard. Good passer. I won't say elite passer, but like 4.5, 5 assists per 36 minutes last season in the NBA. I'll stop here. Do you like his passing? What do you think of his passing? Is he just like a ball mover, or can he be a little bit more than that as a guy who, like, because he was billed as a prospect as like potentially a plus passer? I don't know if I've seen that, but I do like the passing.
I think he's a good passer, and I think sometimes the way we all collectively watch basketball, we put too much value on flashy passes and like wow passes. And the honesty, I think if you sat down with most NBA coaches and said, "What do you look for in your secondary?" Like, just make the right pass, make it on time, on target, and just make the right play and go. And then he's capable of that, right? Now in transition, I saw they had 80-foot passes, rebound, one dribble, boom, ball is gone. And so he has that capability kind of there too. But I think the fact that he's just super functional, very connective player, he has all of that stuff, right now. The processing is there, the decision making is there. It's just, we talk about it all the time. It's just reps. Like if you want him to be a high volume second side, pick and roll guy, he needs the reps, right? And it's funny because I'm just waiting for all the arguments about who's going to start back up any day now.
Oh, they're
right?
happening, yeah.
But you think about it, it's like right now, does it make sense to have Dyson plus Ricochet plus Jalen together? Like that's not a ton of shooting at the 2, 3, 4. I know people want to say Ricochet can shoot. Like Ricochet, I think will become a good shooter, but starting the season with those three, like that's a lot of variability, I guess is the word that I would choose there, where getting Bogey into the mix. In other cases, getting Hunter is a good shooter, right? We talked about like the NBA defenses don't really treat him like one, but he at least gives you some real shooting on the floor. And so it's going to be interesting to see the way, because Ricochet needs to play a lot. Like, he's the first, he needs to play a lot this year. Dyson's critically important. Jalen is obviously a massive part of what they're building. I don't know if those three guys playing heavy minutes together. I think that's the future. I think next 25-26 season, or maybe we're there. But this year it's going to be interesting to see how Quinn kind of mixes and matches there to keep enough shooting on the floor, to keep enough veteranship on the floor, to keep enough defensive experience on the floor. And for me, but it's one of those things we talk about on offense. Bogey makes everything easier for, like, on defense, Dyson makes everything easier for everybody. Right. And then we'll see how the offense kind of comes along. But I think he's trustworthy, connective, on time, smart, good processor, looks to make the right play, not trying to do something flashy and kind of, make some highlight play when it's not needed. And I think that's a great starting point for a 21-year-old guy stepping into his first time in big starter minute role.
Today's show is brought to you by Gametime, and Gametime is the best place to find tickets. There's nothing like checking out a live event, whether it is sports and music or even theater or comedy. They also have a new feature at Gametime called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets even easier for you. They filter out the stuff that you don't need and only show you the incredible deals and great seats. You don't have to actually waste any time searching through thousands of different tickets on their app. For example, there are awesome deals all the time for the Hawks, including the season opener this year at State Farm Arena on October 23rd against Brooklyn, including a pair of tickets for only $27 each on Gametime right now, including fees. That's a really awesome deal. Of course, there's more of that happening all the time at Gametime. Plus, my personal favorite feature of Gametime is you can actually view the seats through the all-in pricing and no surprise fees at the end of the checkout process and at the checkout screen. Also get a view from your seats in the app before you buy them, so you know exactly what you're going to be getting to and seeing when you get into that venue. And you're also getting the lowest possible price with the folks at Gametime. Take all of the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app right now, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account at Gametime. Redeem that promo code. It is LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKED on NBA. LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? It's Gametime. One more thing before we get to the shooting in more deep dive fashion. He trimmed his turnover rate a lot last year. Now, granted, that sounds better. His turnover rate as a rookie was sky high, like scarily high. But I will always say this. I got into a bit of a tough with someone the other day about this on Twitter. Turnovers are not a bad thing in every context. In fact, I always make this point, but if you look at the league leaders in turnovers, they're always the best players in the league. Always. Jokic is up there. Giannis. Trae's up there too, to be fair, but Luka, all these guys are super high because they have ball in their hands.
Hi, Chester. Say hi to my friend Chester.
Yes, hello. But granted, I say that Dyson was not a high usage guy, so that's actually a little bit scarier. When your usage is low, your turnover rate's high, that isn't great. But it came down in year 2, which I was encouraged by. It's still relatively high, but that's okay. I'm not worried about that. Just want to at least flag it because that would not be great. And the Hawks do like to play. While Trae makes a lot of individual turnovers, the Hawks have been for years now a low turnover team. And that was still the case. It wasn't quite as dynamic in that way last year. The rate went up a little bit just because Quinn has everybody kind of making more decisions than they did previously. But I think Dyson could fit into that. You use the connecting word is a big one for him. I do view him as a connector, probably long term. I'm not trying to limit him either. But I don't really see a ton of outcomes where he becomes like a super high usage offensive player. I think he's going to kind of always be a defense first, but there's stuff that he can do better. And I think that he almost gets too pigeonholed. We're not at the place now at 21 years old where he is only a stand in the corner and shoot threes guy. That's not what I view him as. Maybe he becomes that in 3 years. I don't know. Maybe we give up on it in 3 years. But for now, I'm kind of with you about the connective potential. But the 3-point shooting, Glenn, I'll give the numbers, right? They're not that bad, I will say. Like people, the way people talk about him, it's like he's shooting 20% from 3, and he's actually not. For his career, it's 31%, which is not good. I'm not going to tell you that's good. It's not, but it's not a disaster. He was 36% from the corners the first 2 years of his career. Now, that's not a good number from the corners compared to everybody else, but that's a productive shot. 36% from the corners is a productive shot. That's one you want to shoot. 29% above the break, less so. We don't love to see that. And the free throw numbers, while they're not always correlated, he's a 65% free throw shooter. That's not very good for a perimeter player. And you mentioned Fred Vincent earlier. There is a skepticism, I would say, across the league. Not that he can't fix his shot, but that he was not in a bad situation for his shooting development, and it didn't really come naturally. He shot it better this summer in Australia, relatively small sample size. But even then, if you saw this in the Olympics and qualifying, all those things, he wasn't being guarded. And there were times, I can think of one in particular later in the process in the Olympics where like he almost was like he didn't want to shoot anymore. And that's what you can't have. I said a lot of stuff there, but that I always say this, I know you do too. Shoot it. And that I can promise you Quinn is already doing this to him. Dyson, you got to shoot. Yeah. And the worst thing he can do is not shoot. But I think that there is a real question about his shooting, obviously.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I always need to help like fans understand how much NBA coaches just want their guys to shoot the ball. And the most extreme example, we're going way back now, is that little stint Carmelo had in Houston. And D'Antoni's system was, if you're open, you shoot it. He would not shoot the ball from the 3-point line. And they were like, D'Antoni's like, you're out of here. Like, it was like, that was a most exaggerated, example and use case I can think of. But yeah, we heard it from Ricochet, like on like his first press, like, we got to shoot it. And Dyson will get that too. And for me, young players that, hey, I have confidence in you, shoot it. I have confidence in you, shoot it. Get it up there. I would think go back to the Boston playoff series where Quinn was like, Jalen, you gotta shoot it, man. And by game 3, he was actually on the catch. He was shooting the basketball.
Well, even Sadiq last year, to your point, Sadiq had this terrible shooting season, but Quinn never once said anything but positive things about Sadiq. Other than obviously they acknowledged that he was in a shooting slump, But it was never like, hey, Sadiq, stop shooting. They do not want that. They wanted everybody to fire away.
Yeah, and you could tell when you listen to Quinn, like his belief is like being a good shooter starts with being a willing shooter. Yep. And just kind of going with it, right? And so it is going to be interesting. I mean, whenever Kevin does a great job, sharing kind of videos from the end of kind of practices, and you'll see Kyle out there working with guys and and stuff like that. And so the Hawks are fortunate to have one of the greatest shooters of all time, in their organization and things like that. And that's not to say that I mean, obviously they have coaches that can teach shooting on the staff too. It's not like go talk to Kyle. Nobody else can help you.
I always laugh when people reply and stuff like that. Like, hey, you should talk to Kyle. I'm like, guys, they do have coaches. Like Kyle's just the GM.
Yeah. And so for me, I mean, that is the thing to watch the first month of the season is there hesitation like we saw at points in the Olympics. And I mean, another part of that is he in some games he was playing a lot, and shooting when you're tired is a different challenge, and learning how to shoot when you're tired is a thing too. But we don't have to kind of do a deep dive on that. But for me, I just think he adds so much defensively, and I think he has a good foundation offensively. And the real, like I said, I'm just repeating myself, but the big variability is what can he do with the ball in his hands as an organic primary when the ball kind of finds him. And I don't think we should, like, after the similar to like the Falcons fans are like, I'm out, like, Cousins looks terrible. I don't think if in three games into the Hawk season, if it's like up and down, I don't think we should like write it off and be like, no, he can't do it. He's 21. So for me, I think it might be one of those things that just kind of grows, across the season. And we'll see how much progress that he can make. But like I said, I believe in his work ethic and his good intentionality as a player, wanting to make the right play, seeking to make the right play, and be a helpful player. And I think if that starts as kind of your mental framing for what you're doing, I think that tends to kind of set you up to be able to have some growth and development in the area like that.
People are going to hear this after the Falcons game, or maybe during, or something like that on Monday, and hopefully that doesn't make us feel silly. Anyway, Falcons aside, no, I won't ask you to break down his mechanics, but do you see a potential shooting improvement? Just obviously we're on the outside. I'll always acknowledge, like, you know more than I do, but I'm not a shooting doctor. Like, it is what it is. Yeah. I can tell you what guys I like, and what certain things that I see. I don't think it's broken. I don't think his shot is broken personally, where it can't improve. Do you agree with me on that fundamentally?
Yeah, I do. I'm not a shooting. I mean, I'm not clearly not a professional shooting coach.
We're not shooting coaches.
The couple things I know to look for, like, I mean, I've taught kids how to shoot. That's completely different. I'm not even the same universe of like responsibilities, right? But for me, the thing is that is the footwork consistent, right? Like, I will tell you, like, the biggest part of Onyeka becoming a good corner shooter is the footwork. When he went in college, like, whether he was shooting free throws or whatever, his bottom half was different on every single shot, right? And so just getting that consistency of footwork, and then the release point being more fluid and having more repeatability, those are like the two kind of big things that I know to look for. You could go talk to an actual shooting coach and they would say, here's the 17 things you look for, right? I don't have that to offer. But just does it look consistent? Does it look repeatable? Does it look fluid? Does it look like he knows how to generate rhythm? There's different techniques, 1-2 shooting, there's different kind of footwork techniques and stuff that different coaches ascribe to. But for me, I just look at, does it look repeatable? Does it look fluid? Does he look confident? Does he look like he kind of believes in himself? And at the free throw line, I think what I saw earlier in his career was just a little bit of kind of a slow release, and so I think that's what I would kind of think back to. And so, but yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like, to me, based upon what I know, it doesn't look like something that a real professional shooting coach can't work with. I guess that's as qualified of a statement I feel like I can make.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And again, I brought it up earlier briefly, but the free throw shooting has not been very good, but it has been a tiny sample. One thing that he does not do right now at the NBA level is get to the free throw line. He's taken less than 100 in his career in 2 years. Again, that comes with being a super low usage player, but I don't know if I'm like hey, he can't make free throws, he can't shoot threes, because I'm not sure about the free throws. That might just be such a small, noisy sample.
Yeah.
But usually there's correlation. Not always, but usually you'd like to see that higher for a guard, and they'll be working with. I'm sure they already are working with him. Tell him stuff.
Yeah. But both he and Jalen have a tendency to want to shoot around the big man at the rim right now. They need to learn how to go get fouls, right? Well, there's a guy you can't really get around. You got to go pump fake or, do something, and I have no doubt Quinn's staff are kind of working with them on, like, in this situation, you're looking for the foul,
Yeah.
So,
especially
and I think that'll
like,
yeah. And I mean, something Dyson showed last year, Moore was using the left hand, which was encouraging. So yeah. I mean, honestly, I think he's going to be so fun to watch this year. I mean, to kind of boil it way down, I think it's going to be so fun to watch this year. So I'm excited for that.
All right, that is it for part 1 of this 2-part conversation with myself and Glen Willis talking all things Dyson Daniels. Part 2 should be available in this same podcast feed right now. So please stay tuned and flip on over to that discussion. Please also subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcast. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, Overcast, Amazon Music, etc. We're also on YouTube. Please like this show as you're watching it on that platform, and please subscribe. And importantly as well, tell your friends about the podcast as the season rolls along. We're trying to get a little bit closer to some milestones on the subscription side, on the like side, all that stuff. So please subscribe, tell your friends about the podcast. Follow us on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there if you'd like to at BT Rowland. Follow also my non-podcast work at patreon.com/BT Rowland. I appreciate everybody listening to the show always, but especially on this roundup episode 1800. Please stay tuned for part 2, and we'll see you all next time.